there are 3,400 publicly traded companies listed on Nasdaq. You are the youngest CEO among robotics, autonomous vehicle, and any related technology.
Ali Kashani, the CEO and co-founder.
Ali Kashani is with us.
Welcome in our next guest. Joining us, Ali Kashani, the CEO of...
We paid the last payroll 10 times, meaning that there was no more money left in the bank. 10 times for a team of about 100 people. So that was in a small group.
I was down on the floor, counting all. Funny how they only call you when the story's already wrote. Give it all again. Lost the room, but I kept the plan. Second time around.
So today we have Ali Kashani, co-founder and CEO of the Serve Robotics, and Brandon, partner and new friend of the pod, the Human Agency. Thank you. I think the good is that we did some research, obviously, but I think the good part to start with it, there are 3,400 publicly traded companies listed on Nasdaq, and also 3,400 CEO. You are the youngest born CEO, which born in Iran. And this is not just that. You are the youngest CEO among robotics, autonomous vehicle, and any related technology. You uplisted from April 2024, almost 2 years. How does it feel?
Surreal. I never thought that I'm gonna run a public company, and partly, honestly, I didn't want to. It's one of those things that I didn't even put in a bucket list, but there was a time and moment where it made sense, and we decided to do it, and it's kind of played out really well. So quite fortunate.
And it's tough day to day, or compared to the private life.
The only thing worse than being a public company CEO is being a private company CEO.
Oh, okay.
I spent a lot more time building the company than I've ever done in the past. It's having the access to the markets and being able to, be capitalized well, but also, the VC ecosystem is an incredible thing for creating the startup scene, but it also has some serious drawbacks. Like, it's very tied to what's hot at the moment, and the VCs tend to kind of go around the same exciting hype to the same space, and then also abandon it together and go somewhere else. And if you've been an entrepreneur who's been around the block, you would know that whatever you're doing, even if it's hot today, it may not be hot in 2 years. So you have to plan for that. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs kind of realize it too late. But part of the reason why we managed to survive and now thrive is because we always understood that this cyclical nature of things was a reality we had to deal with, but it's very distracting and it takes a lot of your energy away from actually building a business. Whereas now I don't have to deal with that. The market is a lot more diverse. There are a lot of other people who want to take a contrarian bet. They're not as correlated as venture capital is. So that gives you a lot more space and opportunity.
John, we always say SecondPod is about the inside, not the story. But before we get to the story, I just want to pay a pat and see for our audience where you've been. So you got your PhD in 2011 from University of British Columbia in robotics under Peter Lawrence. You work on the laser detection technology, if I'm wrong. Yeah. And also before that, you co-founded a company which is on the energy smart technology. And then in 2016, you came to the US. You're hanging out down here at Pear VC as an entrepreneur in residence. Then you team up with Touraj. And then the acquisition happened for Lux. You joined Postmate. On the Postmate X, basically the whole idea of the sidewalk robot born. Then the Uber acquisition on February 2021 is a spin-out of the Serve Robotics. The moment I want to talk about it, it's on 2017, and you basically fired from your own company. You were here, and on the personal side, you were in a tough position too. Like you told me, you cannot afford to fix your car. How did you deal with that uncertainty, and what was your thought process? Bring us to that moment. I think that's a good story.
Yeah, it's probably like the lowest point in the process. But I knew I want to be an entrepreneur since I was maybe like 10 years old, living in Iran. And my dad, I remember this, but we were driving home, and we had, I think, just got the computer, and he was telling me that this guy Bill Gates created this thing in his dad's garage. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. This is absolutely what I want to do. But then I was bummed that he made the PC mainstream and brought it to every home. So the question was, what is the next thing that I'm gonna make mainstream? And I decided it's robots, which is kind of funny because that's exactly what I ended up working on. But so I always knew this is what I want to do, but I never knew how. And I genuinely hadn't heard about Silicon Valley until many, many years later, like very late in the game, is when I learned about this whole ecosystem. I started my first company in Vancouver, probably a mistake. I would say, Silicon Valley really gives you much better odds if you're doing something so challenging. But at the end of the day, I think the way to navigate uncertainty for me was always, there was one thing that was clear. I don't know how to get there, but I want to make sure every step that I make is in the right direction. And I remember like sometimes friends of mine who had a goal, but they would decide that, you know what, I'm gonna go do this little job over here, just make a little bit of money, maybe, it would be nice to have some cushion. I never did that. In fact, there were times where I would be pulled into some project and I would do it for free because I didn't want to make money and get addicted to the idea that if I do that, now I'm gonna get comfortable and now I want to keep doing that. I'm like, no side steps, no side projects, no shortcuts. It's like, I don't know how to get to where I want to go, but I want to make sure every single step that I make is in the right direction. That was the principle. So moving to Silicon Valley after I was fired, I didn't know where it's going to take me, but it was in the right direction. And when I got to that kind of moment you mentioned specifically, I'm fired from my company. I had invested every dollar that I had, and in fact, I had cut my salary so many times to like the bare minimum to take equity instead. So I didn't really have much. So my car's transmission broke, and I was standing on the, in the shop, and they gave me like a multiple $1,000 coat, and like, I can't pay for this. So, I'm very grateful. My family kind of helped me there. And when I moved here, I was living in a bedroom inside some Airbnb. There was a guy with dementia downstairs that would scream at night, and I was genuinely scared of. Funny enough, that's also when I met my partner, my spouse, and I'm like, she really wants you for you. When that's the moment, she accepts you. So, but it was very simple. It was like one step at a time. I'm obsessed with this idea. This is what I want to do. That was very clear. And I didn't know how to get to where I want to go, but I just knew that every step that I make needs to just take me, one step closer to the desk.
But you didn't know that your previous company has the acquisition.
No, I had written it off. Like that was a company that by the time I was let go, we were a profitable company. It was a hardware company, which is obviously very challenging. We couldn't raise money. We had almost died so many times. I think in total we raised $1.5 million from friends and family and angels. And then we signed this big deal with Solar City, now Tesla.
Noorio, yeah?
Noorio, that's right. So the deal was to ship like 10,000 devices per month for a company that had raised barely any money. And we pulled it off. We managed to finance ourselves through Kickstarter and then launched the product for Solar City. And at one point they actually approached us, Tesla approached to buy the company, and they walked at the end. And that was the moment I'm like, that company is dead. Its only customer, which 90% of revenue is coming from this one company, and they just walked away from the acquisition. So we are screwed. So I didn't think that's gonna go anywhere, but very fortunately it ended up becoming a very successful acquisition at the end.
Interesting. So because we want to touch other subject as well. In 2005, there was a competition called DARPA Grand competition, which is basically autonomous vehicle competing each other on the desert. And that was the moment that the LiDAR technology basically unlocked for the commercial. And the winner team, so from Stanford, is build this spinning LiDAR, which we can see in all other autonomous vehicles. You were on that competition. You were undergrad. And fast forward till 2021, you made the partnership agreement with your current LiDAR technology and partner. And that was a very early bit. When we back to that time, other people that trying to do on the sidewalk robot, like Amazon had Scout, camera only, FedEx had Roxo, camera only, Kiwi bought from Berkeley, camera only, even Starship Technology was camera only. And I want to know, what was your thought process? What did you know that other people basically, because the bit work, and there are many people now using LiDAR. LiDAR back in it was very premium and expensive. What was your thought process?
Yeah, so the picture you paint, I add something to it. So from DARPA challenge, I started working with LiDAR. That actually resulted in my graduate program with Peter Lawrence. He needed someone who understood LiDAR and wanted to apply to mining applications. So not the car industry, but safety systems in mines. And my PhD thesis was combining LiDAR and camera. So I worked with both and had to understand how to fuse them together by understanding where their strengths and weaknesses are. So fast forward to 2017 actually is when we first had to have this discussion about the design of our robots. And I had a few thoughts. One, I understood that the cameras were not the right sensor with the AI we had 10 years ago. And if you want to really kind of boil it down to first principles, LiDAR is an active sensor. What it means is it projects its own light, versus camera is passive. It looks at the ambient light in the scene. So the camera would look at this room, and you change the sliders, you change the position of a light, the daylight changes, there is a cloud. Any one of those variables that change, the camera sees this world different. So there's like a million ways that the same room is going to appear to a camera. To a LiDAR, it would always look the same. So if you're trying to train an AI to understand what's going on here, you have orders of magnitude less training and work. And those training and time and labor, it costs money too. It's not free. So it was very clear to me at the time that AI wasn't ready to use a camera-only system. But I had two other kind of ideas. The second one was that cost of LiDAR is going to come down. And part of that is because I was a VC for a year. When I was at Pair, I was looking at companies coming through. I actually looked at seed stage fund or slide decks for companies, LiDAR companies that are public today, and could see their roadmap, their traction, where they thought they're going to go. And you could give it some fudge factor, but still, it was clear to me where it was going. The LiDAR that at the time cost $80,000 today is 98% less. And then the last assumption was that adding LiDAR is much harder than removing LiDAR later on. So if I don't design LiDAR into my system and then it proves that it's needed, it's impossible to add because the battery profile, the compute profile, the temperature, all that stuff is not something you can just slap on. But if I wanted to take it out, if I already designed it in, but I wanted to take it out, much easier. So if I'm wrong, I could always change my mind by removing the parts. But if I'm right, and this is a blocking issue, it was much harder for my competition to change their mind. And I guess the bet kind of paid off. Obviously, AI has come a long way, but if you still look at it today, the companies that have LiDAR are much further along.
I want to touch on two things there. You talked about a bet that you made around LiDAR in because you can remove later. And you also referenced the idea of the design of this robot. And now we see this today. It is one of the most loved designs of anything that we see on our sidewalks. How did that decision factor into the design process?
Yeah, that was one of the advantages of being inside a bigger company. So as you mentioned the history, we were born inside Postmates. If you're a startup, you're going to be very lean. You have to really focus on, here's the technology I need to solve. I really can't afford to do anything else. But I had the additional kind of unfair competitive advantage of having Postmates behind me. So I decided that we need to solve a second problem at the same time, which is societal acceptance. Because if we solve the tech, but the society doesn't accept this, we're going to fail. And we basically brought in some incredible talented people early on. In fact, when I took the budget proposal to the CEO of Postmates and I said, hey, I want to go spend money on this, he was going to say yes, but the CFO rejected it. So months later, I cut a bunch of future headcounts out of my budget, and I went and hired the guy anyway, and didn't tell anything to the CFO or the CEO. Best decision I've ever made. That ended up making the robot really cute and interesting. I think still today, it's the best looking robot out there. I'll give you an example. We had an incident where a robot ran into a glass at a bus station. And obviously not good, right? We are looking into it, what happened, and we kind of investigated, looked at the data. But there's a TikTok video of a security camera, shows the robot coming, it hits the glass, and just stops there and blinks. And you see the reactions in the TikTok. The amount of forgiveness that's provided when people see that and kind of feel that, it gave us an opportunity to say, hey, we are so sorry this happened, and we are working to make sure it doesn't. And people heard us out rather than, the reaction you could have expected, which could have been a lot more negative. So I think that was a really good investment in just, putting us in a much better environment with our audience, with the other stakeholders, to say, listen, this thing is not what you're afraid of. It's not the Hollywood thing that you always imagined. Sure. Maybe take a moment and kind of imagine a more positive version of this, and then give us a little bit of room to fix things as we go along. And I think it was one of the best decisions we made.
Yeah, that's a neat angle towards optimistic futures as well. If you're thinking about a lot of the dystopian sci-fi that has been shaped upon us, it's often doom and gloom around AI, robots, etc. You said something recently I want to come back to. You said sidewalk robots will be a normal part of city life. And I want to dive into one thing there around what you just mentioned. Mistakes are going to be made. How do you structure the approach around enabling trust between Serve and the people?
So I think some of the ingredients for this is the culture and the operating principle of a company, because you don't know what problems are going to come up. Like that glass incident. We've been out there for so long, and something like that had never happened before. And then one day you wake up and you're dealing with something completely new and unexpected, and you're wondering what happened. So you kind of have to have some, foundation that allows you to build that kind of reservoir of trust over time, and not find yourself in a situation where something happens and you're in a deficit of trust. For us, there's a few things. A lot of it is in the company values, but I'll kind of mention one of them. One of the company values that I pretty much apply every week is what we call principle before perception. And the simple idea is, I see this every day in our decision making. We are very social beings. We care about our aberu, or our kind of, how we come across in front of other people. So often when we are in a crisis or something has happened, we are not able to separate that perception issue from the underlying problem we need to solve. So we are optimizing for both at the same time. And that's a disservice to both. So our guidance inside the company is, at any time you're dealing with that friction, forget about perception. Just for a moment. Let's put that aside. Let's make that a secondary problem. Let's talk about the principle. What happened here? What should we do? What's the right thing to do? Let's figure that out first, without worrying about our aberu or our whatever we come across as. Only after we solve this question, let's go and figure out, how do we explain to people now? And somehow it's so much easier. And by the way, when you're solving two isolated problems, you have a bigger search space of solutions to look for. Versus when you mix them together, your space kind of really limits itself. So I found that every time we do that, we have a much better solution. And by the way, if you're doing the right thing, generally it's so much easier to explain than when you've kind of done something because you were worried about the wrong things, and then you have to now explain it, and something goes wrong in the process, and now you really have to explain, why did you do that? Because you thought you were going to cover it up, but no, it got worse, and now you have even a harder job explaining. But if you did the right thing, you're like, listen, this is what I knew, this is why I did it, and I would tell you this, and next time something happens, I'm going to do the same. And over time, people have good senses. They decide, are they going to trust you, or are you full of it? Mm-hmm. And I feel like, I like to think we've built some reservoir of trust over time.
Indeed.
It's very interesting that you build the ecosystem. And it's easy to look, okay, the Serve It's just a cool robotic company. It just got a bunch of funding, and now it dominates the market. But when we're going to double down on the ecosystem you built. So on the hardware side, you partner with NVIDIA, Magna, and on the LiDAR, Oster. And also on the distribution, you partner with the Postmate and Uber, and you talk about it, why distribution matters. And also on the recent acquisition, you actually bring some synergies from the healthcare, which is very interesting. So I want to first back how that mindset of building ecosystem came from, like personally as an entrepreneur and leader in this company, and how did you make those deals? Like, for example, for people doesn't know, Magna is the largest automobile part producer in the North America. Like, and they are not only your contractor for the producing hardware, they basically your partner, they are your investor, and one of the key players on Magna sitting on your board. So how those happen?
So one of the, I think, core purposes as a startup is survival, right? Really simple. Hey, I have this idea that future is going to look like this. Hopefully it's rooted in first principles, and you're going to be said no to a million times, and you got to have that conviction to kind of keep going. But how do you make sure you actually survive long enough to get there when you are at your weakest, which is those early years? So one of the ways to do that is find other people who are invested in the same future and win if you win. So to me, that, and by the way, like Touraj, who you've interviewed, who is a dear friend and president and CEO of Serve, and also the reason I moved to Silicon Valley, but that's a separate story. He was a BD guy. He's very good at this. So I was very fortunate to have him by my side. But the idea was, listen, we are
business development person.
Business development, that's right. We are very vulnerable as an early stage startup in a very high capital intensive space in a market that's very difficult financially right now. So how do we make sure we give ourselves as much grace and room as possible to succeed? And part of that was find the right partners. So you mentioned Uber, NVIDIA, Ouster, Magna, DoorDash now. Like, these are all people that at one point or another, we identified, hey, there is a place we want to go, and we would both win if we get there. And there are moments where, like, it was a survival for us on stake, where I actually picked up the phone and I could call the CEO of NVIDIA or DARPA or CEO of Magna, and we would come together and figure it out. Like that was, if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have survived. So it's really at the most basic level, it's about survival. Find people who care about what you care about and partner with them early.
But how did you close them? So it started from right. It's so hard. It's easy to say, even you use your Persian privilege, everyone want to deal up with Dara, yeah? But you did it, you done it. You bring Ali Partovi on your investor, everyone want to done it. But how did you do it? Like, what is your secret sauce here?
It's actually, I don't think the Persian thing played at all. Funny enough.
That's good for have on the record.
It happens over time. I think the one important, piece is that it's not something you can just call up and say, hey, NVIDIA, I want to befriend you. Like, we had NVIDIA in our offices looking at a robot as early as 2018. And I remember them visiting, I think it was 2019, they saw a robot that got stuck and then it backed away and then tried again. And the guy's like, did it do it automatically? I'm like, yeah. It's like, wow, I'd never seen that before. So that's it, that light bulb moment, that guy became our champion. And his interest was for robotics to take off. And well, guess what? We are one of the companies that are really pushing hard, and they trust us, they love the vision. And we kind of went to them when we spun off and said, hey, would you invest in this? And the answer ended up being yes. In fact, they decided to put 10 times what they usually put in a company at that stage. And that was directly because of Jensen. So again, you build these relationships over time. It never happens overnight. I don't think I can go charm someone. But just being out there, sharing your vision. I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are worried about talking about what they're doing. It's like, oh, people are going to, I'm like, you don't understand. No one believes you. Be out there, scream off the rooftops. That's the best thing you can do. And you're lucky if two people actually see your vision and decide to support you. That's the best thing that could happen.
Just one follow-up, and then we come to you. So you mentioned Touraj. He has a philosophy that always think about exit. I'm just speak it out. Your partnership with Magna, and he said, if you want to exit with someone, partner with it or compete with it. Yeah. Your partnership, Magna, means that you're going to potential acquisition happen or no? Or you're seeing on your strategic planning?
I like to think Touraj has an amazing book, Exit Path, that I highly recommend. And I feel like I was the kind of test subject for every chapter because every transaction he talks about, I went through, and he was helping me along even before joining forces. Look, I think I had a pretty good map of the ecosystem. Like, who are the people who care about this future? You can think of the automakers, because this is a new form of transportation. You can think of couriers, the ones that move goods, logistics. You can think of delivery platforms. You can think of other robotic companies. Like, there was this very clear map of who are the people who are tangentially interested. And we should be building those relationships, because when the day comes where you need help, whether it's an exit or you need funding, or sometimes it's the other side. It's like, hey, look at what I've built. Do you want to now be part of this and kind of take it to the next level? You want to have those people know you and trust you and see your trajectory. One of my favorite investors, Mark Suster, has a really great blog post about this, which is dots versus lines. The idea is investors, and I think if you're inside a company investing in a relationship or a partnership, it's the same thing. You have limited resources. You're deciding how to allocate it. You don't do it on a spot the first time you meet someone. You do it when you see their trajectory. And that's the line versus a dot. It's like, you get a couple of dots and you connect it and you decide, okay, these guys are going in the right direction. So you got to build that over time. And to me, it never happens, in one moment. But I 100% agree with Touraj, which is you can't show up overnight and say, acquire me. You have to have these relationships. But the purpose is not just to get acquired. Yeah. It's much bigger than that. It's just having the foresight. And again, at times for us, it was just, hey, let's raise a few $1 million and let us get to the next stage that we need to get to, because otherwise we're going to run out of funding, which happened like 10 times to us. So that it has a lot more value than just exits.
Yeah, and kind of the nature of survival. In those early days, you're going to be severely concentrated within your customer set as well. And it's almost inevitable. And how do you kind of deal with that process of making that a feature and not something that is a total risk to the scalability of the company?
So it obviously has a lot to do with very specifics of the company, but also the stage you're in. For us, we had a captive customer. Postmates was our captive customer at the very beginning. So that is a huge feature. It just basically meant that I didn't have to worry about business development. I didn't have to worry about integration. I didn't have to worry about convincing somebody else. I had my customer. I was inside the customer, right? When we spun off, again, Uber, a lot of aligned interests. They were an investor. They saw the world the way we saw the world. And, we were the first autonomous mobility company to integrate with Uber. In fact, the first API they ever launched was with us, right? So they were learning and we were learning, and we had that shared interest. Over time, now, like, they're not even majority of our revenue because we've diversified so much. So those are two stages. But I think having the luxury where you could concentrate, focus is the name of the game in the startup world. Like, if you are too distracted, if you're doing too many things, you can't do one thing very well. So it's a luxury, but it's a very scary one. You gotta try to get out of that quickly when you have the opportunity, and we did. But when you're in it, there are really incredible advantages of having that ability to just focus on this one thing that you got to do really, really well.
Sure. So what was that launch point for you to separate out from those deep integrations with Postmates, with Uber? Walk us through that, coming back a few years.
I think for Serve, it ended up being when we started to scale up. So, the nature of the game changes at that moment. So it's like, okay, we've used a deep partnership to understand what we need to build and how to make it work. But for us to then survive, we have to be able to work with multiple partners. It could have very easily been that we would have had to be exclusive to our kind of mothership at that point, right? But we made sure, in fact, one of the first things when I talked to Uber about a spin-off was, we need to be a partner to you, but we can't be an exclusive partner. If that's what you're thinking, I wouldn't want to do that, because that way I can't build a kind of a business that would be strong enough to stand on its feet.
Because of the unit economy, you talk about it, you need to have access to it.
Absolutely. If you're exclusive to a partner, and that partner has its own 100 other priorities, that's not a place you want to be. right? So we had the permission at any moment to go and try to kind of diversify. And we decided to do that when we were scaling up. But it was really important that we were never really limited from doing so. We always had the ability. And that was because from the first conversation with Uber, we were very clear about what we needed to be able to be a standalone company that's successful. Otherwise it just wasn't something that I believed could stand on its own feet.
So let's go into that for a moment, the unit economics. And let's think about this as a single robot, as kind of a unit of capital. Walk us through that. What's that look like today at Serve? And in an optimal future, what does that look like?
So, sure. Basically, we actually think about it in terms of deliveries rather than robots, right? So you have a few different buckets. You could say almost 3 or 4 buckets of cost. The hardware, has a cost. The humans that help robots, and there's different kinds of people. There are people who help robots remotely when they get stuck, and there are people who help robots in person, like cleaning them and charging them and maintaining them, that sort of thing. And then pretty much everything else, like real estate and connectivity and all that stuff. What you notice among all of this is that they're all basically constant cost. It's not a per delivery cost. It's a fixed cost that gets divided by the number of deliveries. So we are, on one hand, driving down each one of these buckets. A good example, and again, I have to refer to things that are public information, our hardware cost was cut in 1/3 between the 2nd generation and the 3rd generation robots that we launched last year. So basically with the cost of one 2nd generation robot, we could build 3 3rd generation robots, which is incredible because the 3rd generation robot is way better. Yeah. It has more compute, it has more range, it has more battery, faster. It has more durability, it is faster, it has better sensors. So that was a big effort that we were pushing. And by the way, also component costs come down, technology gets better, like all that stuff is in our favor. These are all tailwinds. So drive those costs down. When you improve autonomy, you reduce costs of labor. When you improve your operation, you can reduce the cost of real estate. But at the same time, you got to also drive up the usage of the robots so that all the costs are divided by more deliveries effectively. And so that's where we are right now. I think we've done a really good job bringing the costs down. Now we are bringing up the utilization. Together, that gets us to a position where the unit economics starts to work.
And part of that comes down to being in the right place, the right city, the right location. Walk us through that expansion thought process. You've got a whole team that does this, I'm sure. But what are some of those key levers that you think about when you're entering a new city?
Yeah, so we just for background, we started 2025 with 100 robots in basically one major metro, so a few cities in there. That would be Los Angeles. We ended 2025 in 20 cities with 2,000 robots. So it was an incredible expansion year. So there was a team that was working on this well in advance. You can't do that overnight, obviously. It's a physical footprint. It's an interesting problem, actually. You could have put all those robots in Los Angeles alone to just get the economics right. But one thing that we were very conscious of is you want to gradually introduce this into society. You don't want to be like the scooters where suddenly they're everywhere and everybody's upset. It's like, hey, let's go put 100 robots in a city and give people an opportunity to get to know the robots and get comfortable. Because at first it's like, what is this thing doing here? Why is it here? Is it gonna impact me in a negative way? People have questions. It's totally fair. So we increased our footprint, but in a more kind of gradual way. And that now gives us a foundation so that we can then introduce more and more robots over time because we've given people a chance to, understand the robots and given ourselves a chance to understand the environments.
Sure. And a huge part of this, natively, there's some backlash against AI today. Robots part of that game, more in a physical sense, but how much does that factor into the initial decision of going into Los Angeles versus a Midwest US that might have different value sets?
And recently Vancouver, you go down.
Yeah, look, it does to some degree. I think there is some kind of underlying shared, conversation no matter where you go. But some places may have more of a reluctance than others, and you should be conscious of that. We generally want to go places where people want us there. right? Like, why go somewhere where there's hostility? That there's no need. There's plenty of markets to choose from. So we do take that into account, but we also try to participate in the broader conversation. I'm one of the most just unapologetically bullish people about AI, robotics, and the future. I think it's the most incredible thing that's happening. Honestly, it's sad for me that people are so anxious. Like, I have 2 teenagers and I talk to them about it. I'm like, listen, this is the most incredible thing that's happening to humanity. Of course, there are risks. This is not to say there aren't. We are there to make sure that we manage them. But what's about to be unleashed, just, it's going to change our lives for the better. And I truly believe that. And there's so much history to prove that, by the way. Like, people talk about jobs being, for example, a concern. Every technology ever created was accused of killing jobs. The net of all technologies ever created is that we have the most number of jobs and the lowest unemployment we've ever had. So mathematically, it's proven that that's not actually how things go, because when you increase productivity, there are more things to do. There are jobs today that, like, all of us would have been farmers 150 years ago. That's just a fact. But now we do things. Everybody who followed their passion is doing a job that wouldn't have existed 150 years ago.
And you're in a
because
perfect position to almost, you have the responsibility to promote that optimistic view because of what you've seen, of what you know, and what you've been able to create. It's a really great position.
Absolutely.
Put some stat on your go-to-market, and want to take a chapter on your playbook. Uber on the year 5 was applied in 100 cities almost in 2014. So they didn't build car, obviously. And that was a Uber thing, and that was a term Uber came from. They do holiday fast, they don't have offices. And you did almost 44 cities. To be accurate, 22 on food delivery and 20 hospitals. Compared to Waymo, they are on the less than 10 cities. What actual you guys doing? How do you do the operation?
Look, it's a big accomplishment for sure.
There's no office like this. Right. So you come to the LA. So you're not in San Francisco. I think because of the hills, or I don't know, but the situation.
No, the regulation. Actually. Okay. We're working with the city right now.
Yeah. But how do you do it? Like, there's an office. You bring some people. How do you?
Yeah. So look, I think. By the way, I'm a big fan of Waymo, and I think they probably have a more footprint than us. So, it's. There's a few things. So I'll answer your question about how do we roll out. So robots have a depot. So we usually find a location. It doesn't have to be in some fancy street, like nice real estate. It's usually something like a garage, where we can host usually 100+ robots. And we have to do some basic work, like power, connectivity, that sort of thing. So that could take a little bit of time. But the idea is that robots can just basically leave their home in the morning, go to work, and then come home at night by themselves. So it's kind of one of the differences with scooters is scooters don't move by themselves. People have to move them. People have to take them out there. People have to charge them. People have to move them around even during the day to a hot spot like that has more population, and then bring them back. We don't have to do that. The robot can leave, it can do all that stuff by itself and then come home. And maybe occasionally a robot needs assistance in the field. That's rare, but it happens. But mainly they can operate out of that field by themselves, which is obviously really important and distinct. So whenever we go somewhere, we usually identify those spots, we get those real estate. In future, we might be able to partner with restaurants and just host them there, or grocery chains. But right now, that's kind of the basic playbook. And it is pretty straightforward. That's why we've been able to expand so quickly. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have a question?
Yeah, well, I guess, kind of following on with the Waymo comparison. Waymo's in the streets, you're on the sidewalks. What are some of the just total factors that we would consider as distinct in those two cases that makes your case unique and trickier?
Right. Well, there are factors that take us in different, some make it harder, some make it easier. So maybe I'll start with what makes it easier, which is we have about 3,000 times less kinetic energy than a car. And if you want to think about safety, one of the easiest ways to understand safety is it's really unwanted transfer of energy. So if you get hit by a vehicle, it's that kinetic energy transfer that causes the damage. So understanding what that level of energy is, it starts to kind of help you contrast what the safety case is. So it's very hard for a robot of our size at our speed, and speed is kind of a really important factor as well, to really have the safety risk of a car because of that kinetic energy difference. So That also gives us one more luxury being on a sidewalk, which is we can stop at any time to decide what we want to do next, versus a car doesn't have that luxury. If you're at a red light or you're reaching across an intersection, you have a decision to make, cross or stop. If you get it wrong, if you cross on a red or stop on a green, both of these could be life-threatening risk, right? Versus if my robot comes to an intersection and it's not sure if that's a green, it can just stop. All I have to do is make sure it doesn't cross on a red. So I've written a really interesting article about this, that if anyone is interested in AI and how complex it is to develop different kinds of AI, how to tell the difference between very complex application and a simple application, it's a good framing, which is there is an asymmetry in our accuracy, which is the difference between precision and recall, or false positive and false negative. If you care about both of these things to like 6 nines, like 99.9999% accuracy for your false positives and false negatives, that's really hard. And the AI almost doesn't exist for that today. But if you only care about one of the two and don't really care as much about the other, suddenly you can do it overnight. So that, like, I could be 6 nines accurate in detecting, red lights, without having to be 6 nines accurate at detecting green lights. I can be 90% accurate at detecting green lights. That's sufficient. And then a human would just tell me the other 10%, yeah, it's green, please keep going, because I can't stop. Suddenly, my entire domain is so much simpler and, by the way, more capital efficient to solve the problem. What makes it more complicated is because it's even more unpredictable than the roads. In the road, you have a lot more kind of discrete set of actions and things. Still, there is unpredictability, but man, the stuff that happens on a sidewalk, like we've had to deal with a goat on a sidewalk, or mattresses lying there, or like every day there's something, guitar players that I mean, that's a whole other story. So there's every interesting thing that you can imagine, I think, happens on a sidewalk. But that's also kind of the fun of the game, which is, we know that every day we wake up, there might be something interesting and new. And
but not life and death. That's the whole.
It's not life and death. Yeah. I mean, that would really be a freak accident if something like that happened.
So I'm going to shift the gear because we're on a time and so let's go to the IPO. We have a whole episode of the financial mechanics you use on the reverse merger and how smart is that. But it's basically April 2024. Before that, you raised $50 million on the private market from the best of the best. Then you IPO'd. And now we are sitting. Your revenue up year over year, 600%. Your guidance for end of the year is $26 million, which is more than 10x growth. You already have 2,000 fleet combined, the food delivery and hospitals. But that's not the story. On December 2023, you basically want to shut down the company. And you told me that the story that there was a Christmas party, everyone from the company want to, come to the CEO's house probably, and then you have lots of guests, and you look at your wife and say, probably want to go close it. Again, tell us about, again, that uncertainty moment.
I mean, I talked about survival being the name of the game. And look, I share this story usually in private settings because I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, I know, right? Like between us, right? A lot of entrepreneurs think they're alone in that journey because there's a lot of kind of a sampling bias. You only hear the good stuff. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't want to talk about the challenges, but I'm very kind of happy to share because I think it's helpful for people to hear it. From the time we, became a private standalone company, so 2021 we spun out of Uber, to the time we went public, 2024, so about just over 3 years, we paid the last payroll 10 times, meaning that there was no more money left in the bank. 10 times for a team of about 100 people. So that was in a small group. And
this is November?
This is between, again, 2021 to 2024. Okay. We had that experience 10 different times. 3 of those times, I ended up actually paying the payroll out of my mortgage.
Let me quote it from your S1. Your S1 shows you personally loaned the company money twice in this search. April 2023 at Bridge, and also December 2023. Combined, I think crossed one $70,000 and one $700,000.
Yeah. So the Kashani loan,
Yeah.
it's referred to, and
Which
usually
was unusual when I read this one. I said, okay, what that means, and it's
it's
not,
usually the other way around.
Yeah,
It's the company giving the CEO a loan. First of all, listen, I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. Like having that previous exit, putting me in a position to even be able to entertain that. But again, you have conviction, you need to survive. We go back to the recipe. The market really shifted. The first year was fine, actually. We raised the money we needed to raise pretty quickly. Ali Partovi and Neo was there, NVIDIA was there. The following 2 years is when the inflation started taking off, SVB collapsed, VCs basically stopped investing. Basically, Series B, which is where we needed to be for robotics and hardware, was completely dead. And one, I guess, advantage we had is Touraj and I both having background in venture capital a bit. We understood what was happening really early. That listen, this is not like it's going to be done. Especially when SVB collapsed, we're like, this is not coming back. We got to have an answer. And the second thing is, we both, having been around the block, having gone through cycles before, we understood that this boom and bust cycle is coming. So we kept the team lean from the get-go. In fact, even when we were inside Postmates, I used to give this talk to the team. I still do that, about cockroaches versus unicorns. And the idea is that unicorns die in the first kind of winter, but cockroaches can survive nuclear winters. So, it's usually not the most inspiring thing to want to be, but we want to be a cockroach. We want to survive no matter what happens, because we understood it takes us more than 10 years to get on our feet. Usually that's what happens, even if you're not a hardware company. And in those 10 years, there's going to be a couple of cycles. And when the VCs abandon your space, you got to survive somehow. And that's my kind of biggest advice to entrepreneurs is, remember, even if the space is hot, you're doing AI today and everything looks great, 2 years from now, there's no guarantee what's going to be the funding reality. So with that in mind, we had stayed really lean to be able to weather the storm. Despite that, funding was not sufficient, and we kind of reached that last payroll 10 times. The last time we reached that was December 23rd, 2023. And I remember it because 2 days before Christmas, on a Saturday, I had 100 people coming to my home that night. And I have this one phone call that basically was my last hope in the morning. And then I grab my jacket and car key and tell my wife, I'm not going to be home tonight. I'm so sorry, but I got to go to the office and shut down the company. We were done. We have tried absolutely everything. There's nothing else we can do. And to her credit, she's just I've been so fortunate by how supportive she's always been. She didn't even blink. That was just, okay, that's what it is. So I drove to the office, and I came home 2 hours later. I had this one last idea when I opened my kind of laptop, look at the spreadsheet, and you know what? If these 4 people outside of the company, 3 companies and one lender, if they all say yes to this proposal, we would survive. And we would be able to get to 3 months from then, which would have been our IPO. So we're 3 months before IPO. And
so IPO planned before.
IPO was already in motion, yeah. We just needed to find our way there. And we had an investor who pulled out last minute and right before Christmas, which is the worst time because nobody's around. And we had to kind of scramble to find something. And that's the day, by the way, I called Jensen, and he basically talks to me the next day at 6:30.
Let's double click on that. Before Christmas, you called Jensen.
Yeah, a couple of days before Christmas. He's one of the people that I called. And NVIDIA really showed up. They kind of carried that round and gave us funding. And then Uber and Magna and then the lender, basically, they all kind of chipped in. That was what helped us survive. But for a moment we were done. Touraj and I had talked to bankruptcy lawyers. We were we're done here. We have to start the process. And then I had this one last idea, and I called Touraj. And I'm like, hey, what if we do this? And we divide and conquer. We started making phone calls. And
can you tell us what did you do?
Yeah, we needed money. And
now, what was your strategy?
The strategy was bring all those partners that have a shared interest in our success and find a way, because everybody had a limitation. One party couldn't invest because of whatever mandate they had. Another one could invest but a certain amount and needed somebody else to lean. And another one was well, I would only invest if you have this much. So everybody had some constraints, and we were trying to just piece it together and find a way to make it work. And again, magically it did. And the funny story is, again, I end up paying one more payroll and out of my mortgage. And then 3 months later, we are ringing Nasdaq. So the discrepancy between those two moments is just wild. And since then, by the way, we've raised $450 million, and the team has grown. The robots have grown. Like, I've been building companies since then. The fundraising just becomes, a phone call basically.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And now you're in a boat of, you're dealing with public investors. Robotics timelines, not naturally linear. What do you feel are often like the most misunderstood levers from your investors? What don't they see inside of what's going on at Serve?
There's a lot of noise right now. And even though we're at the peak of robotics, I worry about the valley again, because that cycle is going to keep happening no matter what we do. And you have to always be ready for that. So I think, for example, humanoids are a really interesting science project right now. I don't believe that in the next couple of years and a timeline of a hype, we are going to see results. In 10 years, we probably would. And that's incredible. And I'm very excited for it. I'm glad that those investments are happening. But some folks that are doing that today may not fully appreciate that, or maybe a bit more bullish. So we have to be ready for the other side of the cycle. And again, we've always operated with that understanding. So sometimes it's just explaining to people what to expect, how long does it take, what's realistic and what's not. That's that, and really filtering through the noise, it becomes the hardest part. But we can only do so much. We tell our story and we build a reputation. We're like, listen, here's what we said we would do. Here's what we've done. If we missed it, this is why. If we did it, here's how we succeeded. And we just kind of build that track record. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, and the growth that you can point to from this year, a huge part of that story, even if a valley is to come in this space, you still have, you've built that well of trust.
And listen, you don't control everything. You can't control everything. The number of things that have happened since I started Serve, we had a pandemic, we had multiple wars, multiple supply chain crises, the inflation, just there's no way you can foresee any of that. So all you can do is just be comfortable with the uncertainty and position yourself to survive.
Since we are in here, this physical AI ecosystem, there is a study that LLM versus robotic. Basically, LLM took off, let's say, 2012 with the AlexNet, and then now we have 2026. We have basically agentic auto research, whatever. In the physical AI category, you mentioned it. You are kind of commercial physical AI API, and we have some humanoid bits, Elon's, Figure. Also, we have foundation models, generative foundation models. We have Chinese on a different category, and we call it drone autonomy. What is your, let's say, perspective about these physical AI ecosystem? Where is the most value, not for Serve, but like general, and what do you think?
Look, I think
compared to LLM.
Yeah, what we call physical AI is really the natural kind of evolution of AI, because why should it be limited to just the digital realm when it can impact everything? And obviously it's harder, but I'm very excited by things that touch the physical world. Amazon, in fact, if you look at the top 4 or top 10 tech companies, I think half of them or more touch hardware. So whether it's having warehouses and operating them, or Apple with their hardware, or NVIDIA with the GPUs, or Tesla with so people are really excited about software. But if you want to build a durable business, hardware is a really good way to do it. It's harder, but it's also much harder to come in after and try to eat your lunch. And I would not want to be a software company or a SaaS company worrying about the AI. Like the stuff that you can now do with this agentic coding and all that, it should be genuinely scary. But for us, it's all tailwind. And the way I see it, to answer your question, is I believe that, like most things, the first problems that are going to really create value, or the solutions that are going to come to market and create value, are going to be around narrow applications. So if you need to do one thing repeatedly, or like the same kind of thing, for example, warehouses have been solved for a while, right? Like it's very simple, robots control the environment. Our robots just move stuff. Now, they're not in a controlled environment. They're much more challenging to build, but it is a specific application. My robot doesn't need a head. It doesn't need legs necessarily, or arms. Like, it simplifies everything. The cost of a robot today is less than Elon's projected cost of his humanoids once it reaches millions of units. And we know Elon's estimates are, on the more optimistic side.
Even Figure is on that same category, or Chinese.
I would assume so. There are humanoids that are somewhat inexpensive today, but you need to understand, can it operate all day on a battery? Does it have the right sensors? When you add all those factors,
Because Serve is on a 24 hours battery, yes?
24 hours of all day battery. I mean, we don't need to be out 24 hours because at night there is no delivery. So, but the full day we need to cover, we can cover, right? And when you think about it, you don't need parts that are not relevant to your application. And if you can scale with a more narrowly defined robot, your odds of building a technology that works and it's cost effective is higher. It always starts there. At some point, we're going to hit a limit and say, okay, you know what? The way I can reduce the cost of my robot even more is if it can do more things, therefore I can scale it even further. So the generalization comes later. Even with AI, we first had the narrow AI that started working. Now we're getting the general AI. So humanoids' entire value proposition is generalization. They can do many things. And I don't think we have quite got to the level of scale from the narrow robots yet. Because once we do, it would drive the cost down for the humanoids. A lot of the parts are the same. A lot of the technology is the same. So I think that's the sequence. It's going to start with the narrow applications, hospitals, sidewalks, and there's many, many, many more places where you have those narrow use cases. And once you solve that, you get to actually go and start to generalize and have the other form factors. May not have to even look like a human, but it would be more capable. That comes after.
Mm-hmm. So let's couch this this next question really in the idea of kind of the advice that you'd give to somebody who might have been in your shoes 20 years ago. You can go the route of, say, let's go join physical intelligence, work on foundation models, or to continue this thread, you go and start a company, a commercial robotics company in a narrow wedge. If my goal as that young person listening, watching this, is to make the biggest impact on the world, what would your advice be to them?
Don't follow trends. I've very, what is the word I'm looking for? I've been very religious about not following trends, even though it looks like we are so trendy right now, AI, whatever. But remember, I studied this 10 years ago. And even the companies I started before that were using AI and like large volumes of data. It wasn't about the trend. The trends come and go. In fact, if you look at, there was a really interesting chart showing what was the hype of the time at any given year and what was the most valuable company created that year. They do not match. So there is a very good chance that the most valuable company being created right now is not going to be in one of the kind of hypey areas of like maybe physical AI or whatnot. Usually, if you were there a little bit earlier, you saw something coming around the corner, you have a much better position to do it, right? So my advice is you can't predict these ups and downs and the hype cycles. The best thing you can do is find something that you're obsessed with and just go basically focus on that. Because again, the name of the game is survival, and it starts with you. Like your obsession is what determines whether or not you're going to survive long enough when you go through all those ups and downs. If you're obsessed, chances are you're going to stick with it long enough for the world to catch up with you. And if you're not, and you're following a hype, chances are you're going to see another hype later and give up too early. Because this is a game of persistence. Nothing happens overnight. And that's what we have really low churn rates at Serve. Like our employees are very, very loyal to the company. And part of it is we all understand this idea that, listen, value is not created overnight. And especially in Silicon Valley, everybody's like, oh my God, look at that company. Like, listen, you only see the good ones. That company that is so popular right now spent 10 years getting there. Yep. And people who capture the most value, even individually, are the ones who stuck with it long enough. So having that mentality requires you to be really freaking, again, almost compulsively passionate about something. So that's my advice to anybody, is to just find what you really care about.
We started SecondPod as a given side to the entrepreneurs in the 30s and 40s, specifically immigrants. You hit all the marks. But when you go to the theme of your story, you start from 2017 or even before that, there is one, let's say, condition that it seems you are very comfortable with it, which is uncertainty. It seems that you have a philosophy for it. You build the muscle to tackle for it. So first give us advice or your perspective about the people that you'll say, okay, I have my job, I don't want to, change my current situation in life, how I should deal with uncertainty. And the second of it, do you want to like share more about your philosophy with others? Do you have any plan for it?
Yes, I absolutely do. So thanks. I don't know if you know this and you asked, but yes, I'm actually writing a book about this. So thank you. I
But it's
have been writing
clear.
a book
It's
for a
very
long time.
clear.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it's not. It's people because I'm trying.
Yeah.
As like many people, it's easy to say like, okay, I'm gonna be bankrupt, and then
Right.
call Jensen. It's not like that. There
Right.
are lots. First, you need the credibility. You always be the someone they pick up the phone.
Right.
And why they pick up the phone? Because you actually did the job many years
Yeah.
before.
The lines versus dots,
Yeah.
right? Look, I think, again, going back to the theme of survival, the way you survive uncertainty, the first thing to understand is that it's not just happening to you. It's actually the normal thing that's happening to everybody, and it's really your job. I actually believe that startups are this most incredible engine for entropy reduction that the world has ever created, which is basically converting uncertainty into knowledge. That's what we do, and we do it really efficiently and well. That's this entire system of capitalism, in a way, does that, but specifically startups do that extremely well. Because you can't just go show up. Like I remember as a kid looking at this, like Chevron as a company, I'm like, how did they make that? I mean, that's incredible. How did they do that? Well, you can't just say, I'm gonna make a Chevron, right? Like you gotta find an angle, go into this uncharted environment, somewhere that no one else, like have to have a contrarian take, something that others aren't trying. That's an uncertain terrain that no one has navigated. You're choosing to go deal with uncertainty. Now, I know a lot of people who get there and then something happens and they're like, why is this just happening to me, right? They look outside, like, look at all these successful companies. I'm the only one who is so unfortunate that's dealing with this random stuff every day. I wake up every day knowing that random stuff is my job, right? And if you have that perspective, it makes, again, surviving uncertain times much easier. And what's really important is for a few things, based on first principles, you have to take a position, you have to take a bet. For example, I had to believe that sidewalk robots are the way of the future. I had to believe that LiDAR is probably the right choice for me at the time. So there were certain bets that we had to make early on. With everything else, I'm very comfortable not knowing. So if you ask me what's gonna happen in 3 years about X, I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna operate in such a way that I can get through that without having an answer and a commitment that would kind of anchor me to the wrong point at the solution space. Basically, I need to be able to be flexible. It's very hard. Literally our DNA is against uncertainty. Like we have so many psychological things in us that have been built over the years. Like we get stressed. The amount of times you are experiencing anxiety and pain that are about things in the future that never happen. If you start cataloging these moments where you're stressed and you're like, okay, let me write this down. What's worrying me? Write it down and then track it. I've done this. Track it down in some time and see how many of them actually happen. You realize that you're suffering from things that never come to pass. It's very rare that any of them comes to pass. So building the muscle, and this takes exercise, and I've been very deliberately building that muscle to be able to ignore those anticipated pains and understand that dealing with uncertainty is the job. It's not some byproduct or some unlucky misfortune. It's actually what you're there to do. I think it just changes your perspective about everything. And if you can do that, I think the most value you can create as a person in society is when you go into those uncertain places and convert that into knowledge and order. It's where the most interesting stuff always happens there.
And you come to that point from working with a collection of wonderful people, meeting a whole host of influential people in your life. If there are one or two that you would single out that have really been kind of a guiding light for you, a role model of sorts that showed you the way, who are they and why?
Obviously, being very fortunate to have come across some incredible people. So, I've mentioned Touraj. He's the reason I moved to Silicon Valley. I met him in my first startup. He basically had been an advisor and mentor to me since, and no expectations. There was no formal relationship. It's just this person who was just so caring and kind that, in fact, when I would come visit Silicon Valley and I didn't have a lot of money, I would crash on his couch. So, that, like, the influence he's had on my life trajectory is incredible, and now I'm so fortunate that I'm working with him. There are many others. Pejman is the person who invited me to be an EIR, at Pair, and that's basically, I drove down from Vancouver, and that's when I moved to the US. Noosheen is another mentor of mine who, I always can pick up the phone and ask questions. There are other folks in Vancouver. There was a mentor of mine, Mark Dance. Unfortunately, he passed recently, but just one of those people that, like, I was right out of college having no idea what I'm doing. And this guy, I would meet him like every 5 months for coffee for 40 minutes. And then I knew what I need to do the next year and a half. Just like the clarity. Amazing. He was an engineer by background, but an entrepreneur. I'm like, the level of clarity this guy had was just always, every step of the way, it kind of helped and changed my trajectory. So for everybody out there, find those people, and they need to believe in you. It's not like you can just pick up the phone and someone's gonna see that thing in you. But Mark's, what he saw is he gave me an advice, and then I showed up a week later. I'm like, okay, I called Google, I did this, and you did that? Like, usually I give this advice and people don't follow through, they ignore. That was the moment where, like, he decided to believe in me, right? So just do your thing. You would find those people, and then when you do, it could be quite life-changing.
I know you have to go. Just a last question, you mentioned it publicly. What is your hope for Iran?
So I learned about the war from my mom. She told us actually that she heard the first bombings. So thankfully a week ago she got out. It's very hard to watch. Like, we all have families, right? Like, we didn't just leave. I left when I was 17, but most of my family is still there. So it's a very tough debate to see, are we going to root for this war, but they're killing people, even if the war doesn't happen, or now the war is killing people. It's just such a messed up place to be, right? I'm really disheartened by the discourse of our community. It's really hard to watch how that's playing out, and how we can't even be united in a moment like this. But what gives me hope is just how incredibly talented we are, and what the potential for Iran really is. So I have no doubt these monsters in that country are gonna go. Like, it's just a matter of time. I hope that we change that dynamic among us and start to be kinder to each other, and start to actually, like, plan for what that future looks like, because, man, we have so much potential. Yeah. It's just really sad to watch. But yeah, all you can do, I'm inherently an optimistic person. That's why I'm an entrepreneur. So I hold that hope that every bad thing that happens becomes a lesson, and we get stronger and better for it.
I think we can deal with this uncertainty, hopefully, and it's a good place to end it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Edge.